Man, thought I had something. Okay, I guess I'm missing. Oh, I found it. What up, Maddie? What up, Harsh? Welcome in, guys. What up, Alex? Is tomorrow gonna be the end of the world? It actually, the suspense right now literally feels that way. I'm not gonna lie. What up, Roger? What up, Corey? Appreciate that, Maddie. Well, welcome in, guys. Those of you that just joining in. Today was really, you probably heard me say it on live. I mean, it was literally like watching paint dry. I mean, it was just horrendous. I actually did something today that I normally don't do, only because it takes a lot of patience. But I was actually scalping today, pretty much for most of the morning, and then a little bit towards the lunch hour. And yeah, that was pretty brutal. What I would normally make, saying it within the day, and just like literally holding a trade, it literally, I, I made a fraction of that just scalping trades all day today. That's literally how brutal it was. So it is what it is. Hopefully tomorrow can kind of just puts us in the clear. That's really what we're just looking for going into tomorrow. We'll see what the Fed minutes come out and say. We're gonna have that tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern, guys. So let's see what the Fed minutes say, and then we'll get a clear reaction. Don't go by the immediate reaction. Wait for a little bit of a follow through. Don't try to jump the gun. There's a lot of times where we get these Fed minutes. You'll get a random spike for no apparent reason, and if the news ends up being apparently bad, then you're gonna get a hard reversal. So that's something I want to point out. Hopefully, save somebody there tomorrow. Don't try to get in on that first spike and chase it. Wait for the reaction. Give it a little bit more time and wait to see if it ends up reversing or not. That's what my suggestion would be going into tomorrow. All right. But real quick, I don't have that much on the watch list tonight, and then we'll see what up, Dennis. We'll see what tomorrow really brings. I'll pretty much just play by ear. I only have about four kickers that I'm really watching as far as the setups that it's really giving me. But if you saw last night on S&P Feuds, we had this little bit of a wedge action that we had going on here. We broke down from this massive megaphone action that we had. Give me a quick second. My bad for that. So we had the little megaphone action going into yesterday that we had. I ended up saying that we're going to be in this little bit of a little tight wedge here. We ended up breaking down that support. We actually wicked right off into the zone that I had. If you saw previously when we broke down from this little descending wedge, we actually had that as a support. We had that intermediate resistance, and then that was also the breakout point. So it's likely that we end up back into this point going into tomorrow. I would expect going into overnight here that we're likely gonna get a resistance test off of that megaphone that we broke down from, and then we'll make the next leg going into tomorrow morning. And according to what Avery's projection is, he's looking towards 458, which will put you right into the lower end of this little zone that I have going on here. And then he has a little bit of a rising wedge action going leading into the Fed meeting. So that's entirely possible. We get this resistance test, we get that next leg down towards 458, and then that pretty much is our little bit of our reversal at that point. So that's what we'll look for going into tomorrow. I don't expect too much. I mean, again, Fed minutes at 2 p.m. is really going to be the turning point. What we're pretty much just looking for is tomorrow morning's direction more so. And then the Fed minutes will really give you the bigger picture going into the end of the year. All right. If sentiment reaction is really going to be bad tomorrow after the Fed minutes, then yeah, then you can say that the world's pretty much going to end, that the Christmas rally may be at risk. Although I don't anticipate that personally. But between this 458 range and between this resistance that we're going to end up hitting, that's pretty much your wide zone between 464 and then 458 is that range that you're looking at going into tomorrow. All right. And then a little similar with Nasdaq Futures, not much of a difference here. You still had that massive megaphone action that we have as well. This one's a little more volatile. You actually had the double top formation as well. You had that first leg that caused the first top. You had that little bit of a dip, caused the second top, and then that drop. So It's likely that we're going to make that leg down. We'll likely even out to the bottom here. Hit a little bit of that resistance towards 15,560, and then we'll get the nice little bounce that'll take us right into this intermediate dip that we had, and that'll be our potential resistance. That'll cause us to likely go back down, depending upon the Fed minutes. Okay, so I do expect us to end up getting right back into the zone, and that's going to be equal the other side of this double top action that we have. So we'll end up finding that support right around this level here, around 15,558. We'll have that support, and that should end up being our bounce going into the intermediate resistance that'll align with this dip that we have off the top of them, the little double top there. If I probably give you a line so you pretty much look at what line I'm talking about, it'll be right here, is which that line is what I'm talking about. And you see that's really the dip that you had off of that double top action. So that's what we'll likely use as a resistance once we get the reversal from the bottom here, and we'll trend right up. And that'll likely be the action we get going into tomorrow morning. So I would expect us to actually start to leg down when that, as you see, futures are pretty much weak. It's likely that we'll get a weakness, we'll get that leg down, get right into that zone that we have to match the other side of the double top action, and then we'll trend towards the morning, and that'll be our little pump going into the Fed minutes. And then Fed minutes will determine whether we break that resistance or we continue to make a bigger leg down than we actually saw today. All right. And then just real quick, running into the tickers that I'm actually watching, we had Tesla's action today. That one was that literally got away from me. I think it was around like 2 p.m. Eastern, if I'm not mistaken. No, it was 3. Right, an hour going into the power hour. I literally went to go take a bathroom break. I came back and it's literally just popped about $12. I don't know if maybe Thanos actually caught it or not. Dougie caught it, but that literally was just a monster move. They literally just took that. It was just a parabolic move. I actually thought there was news surrounding Tesla when I came back to my computer, and I was like, "What the hell is this massive pump?" And it was, I heard Dapper just calling out other names, and then I understand it was the overall pretty much the tech sector in which we got a nice little relief bounce. But that was a hell of an actual bounce. At the market close, I ended up defining that it was a little bit of a descending channel formation, and that close actually hit us right into the resistance of this descending channel. So I'm going to look to see tomorrow morning if we end up getting the break of this resistance. If we end up getting that break, then we're likely looking into the gap fill as the play here, in which that's going to take us into that gap fill at 10:05. So we'll likely see if that ends up happening. I know there's some resistance also around 985, 986. So we'll see if that's also another stopping point. That'll be a heavy resistance area as well before we get to test the gap fill. But that pop literally got away from me. When I say I was literally scalping all day, I was scalping Tesla all day too as well. I think I took like 4 scalps on it. And then when I actually saw it, and I came back to my computer and I saw it pop like about $10, I took a short on it just to see if we would reverse back down, because I was expecting to get a little bit of a next leg down going into the close in the market. I saw $24 in profit and I literally just took it right away. And right when I sold, it popped right back up. So glad I sold that, but we'll see what it does tomorrow. I like the formation here. I like the gap fill that we have above. So if market does decide to run, like I would expect Nasdaq's gonna do, after we make the leg down on Nasdaq futes, we'll likely see this start to trend tomorrow morning into the Fed minutes as well. All right. The other one was Amazon. I'm looking at this one also. Got away from me with that little falling wedge action. Literally just ripped along when Tesla actually had this rip as well into power hour. So I'm looking at this one as well. We do have a little bit of a resistance here. I'm watching towards 34.31, and then also 35, around 35.76 is where we have our next resistance. So I'm gonna keep an eye on this one, more so towards 34.31. I don't necessarily expect to get past that unless we literally break resistance on Nasdaq futes after the Fed minutes. So, but 34.31 is really the ideal mark that I'm looking at tomorrow morning, if indeed we do get that little bit of a pump going into that Fed. All right. The other one was Moderna. This one stood out just a little bit. I also identified this pattern as well into the close of the market. You also have a little bit of a descending channel formation. And as you broke out from it, you got a little bit of a retest, but that ended up forming a little bit of a rising wedge action. So I do want to see tomorrow morning if we end up breaking down on this rising wedge, then I'll likely see that we're going to hit support of the descending channel that we broke out from, in which is going to probably make a massive leg down, and hit the prior low that we end up having right around 233. And so I'll look to play that one if it ends up presenting itself as a short. But otherwise, if it ends up breaking above the resistance of the rising wedge, which that has actually been a trend, then I'm going to watch it right into the gap fill here, and which will test that right above 287.70 here. So I'll keep an eye on that one. We'll see how it plays. I think it actually has a big move in either direction because that gap fill is actually quite large, and then also getting into that low of that 230 area. That's going to be a nice move as well. So let's see how that's going to be as well. That should be a big mover as well with Amazon and Tesla. So I'm pretty much presenting big movers here going into tomorrow morning. And then the last one, just to keep an eye on, would be Facebook. Uh, the reason I actually say with Facebook, and this was a little bit more aki as far as with a pattern that I'm watching develop, but you have a beautiful little neckline right here, and you have a pretty wide left shoulder. You have just a literally a steep looking head right here as it just literally goes vertical. It's not very wide. And then so what I'm potentially watching here is that you may end up having a wide right shoulder if that ends up matching. So I do want to see if we get a little bit of a wide shoulder action in which we'll see a nice little dip and then a pop going into tomorrow morning, and I'll look to play that one for a scalp tomorrow morning. But what I'll likely do is try to time the top here. That's what I'm really going to look to see because I do like to take a little bit of an early entry on when I see patterns developing rather than taking at the neckline because I can potentially get a bigger move. But if I actually see this get right around the area here, 336, 337, that may be a spot where I potentially start to short and will likely see it start to curl down towards the neckline. And that's what I'm really watching on Facebook going into tomorrow. So we'll see how that one also plays out. And then of course, if once we break the neckline, then we're looking at a gap fill here below 321. We have that nice little gap. And I actually just identified you do have a small little tiny gap here as well, right below 323 as well. That's a tiny little small gap that you have to fill. So 323 and then also below that 321 level. We'll watch those two gaps. But ideally here, I want to see this right shoulder peak, and that'll be where I start to scaling into puts to get an early entry to take that right down to the neckline. That's what I'll be watching. But other than that, just focusing on just a few tickers at a time going into tomorrow. I don't want to be all over the place. I may not even trade much going into tomorrow as well because I would rather just wait for the Fed minute to get a clear direction, know whether my longer term positions are really going to be for the upside or the lower end. You also saw yesterday I was pointing out all the unusuals that pretty much were bangers. Another one that hit this morning for me particular was ARC. I told you guys I was out. I had a starter position in ARC. It was about 3 contracts that paid about 400 or something dollars. I opened right out the gate. I cashed out on it. I could have literally stayed cash all day, but since I was staring at the market just bleed all day, I got forced to literally just scalp by myself. So it all worked out. I closed the day green on all those scalps. So it was beautiful. But tomorrow, if the market does not really present anything that is really just choppy, I don't plan to scalp. I may look at the unusual calls. That may be a position I look to get into. But other than that, pretty much just stay safe tomorrow going into the Fed minutes. That's will be my pretty much my message here tonight. You don't want to take anything. Pretty much just force the situation here, like I kind of cautioned yesterday. Because if you tried to buy the dip up today, you literally got slaughtered. So that's the message here tonight. Just stay patient tomorrow. Just wait for the trend to really form going into tomorrow. We do expect a little bit of a pump going into the Fed minutes. If that ends up being the case, then yeah, just keep your positions light as you try to buy calls there. That'll be my message as well. But we'll see what tomorrow gives us. Heads up also, I will be leaving out of town tomorrow after market close. So Tom will actually be covering for me tomorrow evening and Thursday evening for daily recap. So you guys get a heads up. I'll be back Monday morning for trading live. But just a heads up so you guys are aware. I will have my phone with me as well. So if anything, just pretty much just ping me. If I can give you feedback, give you a chart that's requested, I will at that moment. But other than that, everyone else is pretty much here except me, and I believe Avery's also leaving tomorrow morning. So you get a heads up. So I pretty much would say ping me. I don't know about Avery. I know that he'll pretty much be giving his comments as he travels in the chat, but also a heads up for that as well. All right. What's the best strategy for scalping? They've actually, the best strategy about that is really how you play rapids. And when I say how you play rapids, is that obviously you're looking for the trend, you're looking for the little wedges, the little pretty much defined moments. Like as if I was to tell you a little beautiful one right here. If you're looking to scalp, say, a falling wedge action, and usually when you're, and this is actually a 15 minute, I should show you on a 5 minute, and this is when I actually did Tesla. So if I actually move over to Tesla real quick, probably give you a better idea. Let's see if I look at the 5 minute here from today, and usually when I'm scalping, it's usually 3 minutes. It's usually something very quick. I took a nice little move out of this falling wedge right here. Now, did I expect for that to be a full-on leg all the way up? No, I did not. But what I ended up doing was that once I saw us start to break out on this candle right here, what I ended up doing, especially being that this is a volatile name, this is not a name that you want to end up going in with a lot of size, especially in the middle of the day, because then you don't want to find yourself averaging down when you're trying to just scalp. I literally just went in with two contracts, but what I did was I set a limit order. So as I ended up seeing this pop, what I was looking for is looking for the retrace. So that's what I ended up doing is I just set a lowball order as I saw this breaking out of this falling wedge. I set a lowball order looking for that candle to really retrace back towards the resistance area where it broke out from, or the next candle to actually be our support test, and which is going to build a base for that leg up. Once I did that, then you pretty much treat it like a rapid, in which case you're looking for a quick 8 to 10% profit. That's literally what I did in this scenario here today. That was exactly one of the trades I actually took off today. Was that I saw that candle, and as you see it, that was a pretty massive candle just shot off on a 3 minute. I once I saw that candle start to wick out of that falling wedge, out of that resistance, I set a low balling order, and I was expecting it to hit right around this resistance level, probably peak right back in it before we got a continuation to the upside. So key is pretty much setting a low ball order, setting a limit order, and that's usually what you hear me saying when we get the rapids early in the morning. I usually say look to enter under this price point, and also setting limit orders. It's the same scenario when you're scalping. All right, you end up trying to get a fill at the bottom of the candle, and once you get that quick pop right back to the upside, especially with volatile names, you pretty much just look to exit, and you take your quick 8 to 10% gain out of that. All right. So that's what will be my message when you're scalping. Of course, you still want to look for those intraday patterns. As you see, that was a beautiful textbook little falling wedge action. Did I expect to get this entire full move, the full length, to recover that entire falling wedge? No, I didn't, because I did end up, when I cashed this one out, it was about 14% because of how the length of this candle. It was about 14% or so when I actually cashed out on the scalp with two contracts. So that's what my message is tonight for scalping. Set a low ball order. If you don't get filled, you don't get filled. You just move on to the next play, the next pretty much your next pattern that you identify, whether it be another ticker or not. Okay. But you set a limit order, you set a low ball order, and once you get that quick pop, you're in, you're out. That's it. All right. That's what I was pretty much doing. Just pretty much looking at all these dead cats. You literally just bleed it out. Tesla was just the one that it actually held up compared to the rest of tech. If you actually saw my stream as well today, I was watching from Microsoft. That was one that I actually did have a full size position in, and I found myself averaging down right into the end of before we ended up getting that pop of power hour. I was literally averaging down, and you saw it on my stream that it was trying to build a base, and it was down about $16 going into power hour. Now, I knew that it wasn't going to recover $16, but I knew that it would get about a $2 to $3 move intraday, even if it ended up closing down at the low of the day. And that was really what I was watching. I did end up averaging down. But what ended up happening with that is I ended up closing the position right before power hour, before that little pump that we ended up having. But I got out with about, I think, somewhere between 8% profit, the 11% once I closed out the last two contracts I had. And then next thing I know, right when I came back and I saw Tesla pop, Microsoft pop, and I was like, wow, I ended up having a full size position. Now you decide to pop. So I missed out on a little bit of profits on that one, but the most important part is that I closed green on Microsoft, and that was what I was looking for as the base, and how I pretty much identified the ticker that I really was going after today, more so to get a full size position was is because Microsoft was really down about $16. And given the fact that Apple, Microsoft are two real heavyweights in the Nasdaq, if we're gonna get any kind of intraday bounce, I wasn't necessarily expecting it from Apple. I was expecting it from Microsoft. Once the market did decide to give us that intraday bounce, so down $16, I was expecting to be down about $14 intraday at some point in time, give us that little bit of a bounce, and that would be my exit point for a nice little quick move, maybe a quick 20% gainer. But it didn't end up happening until I ended up exiting, and then we just had that vertical movement in power hour. So that ends up happening. I mean, I don't think anyone expected that vertical movement that we had in Power Hour. Some bulls really came out, really thinking that the bear market's over. We'll see if that's the case tomorrow. I think the Feds will really be the ones to determine that, not necessarily that little pump that we had today. What I do see is that, as you saw the charts that I literally just posted out here, I mean, the ones that had a prime pattern that I could identify, you see that there's a continuation that is looking forward to going into tomorrow, and that's what I'll be looking to get a continuation for. Is getting those getting a little bit of momentum off of those little gap ups that we had going into the close there today. So nonetheless, I think we'll wrap it up here tonight. I'll see you guys on live tomorrow morning. We'll see what the market gives us. I'll be watching those four names going into tomorrow. That's why I'm just keeping my watch list pretty small tomorrow. I'm not trying to go all over the market, really try to be in too many different names. So I'll just focus on a few. We'll see what develops, and we'll go from there. All right. Other than that, though, guys, we'll call it a night. I'll see you guys in the morning, and that'll be all then. All right, guys. Have a good night, everyone.